In February 2022, I married the love of my life, Mark, and we started our new life together in New York. Our wedding was a dream, the start of what we thought would be a perfect life. I remember the day we exchanged vows so vividly. The room was filled with love and laughter. It was everything we had hoped for, but life, as it often does, had other plans. By April 2022, Mark had received an exciting job opportunity that required us to relocate. We decided to move from New York City to a quiet, peaceful suburban area in California, far away from the hustle and bustle of city life. The thought of starting fresh in a new city felt like a new chapter for both of us. We packed our bags, said our goodbyes, and set off toward what we hoped would be a bright future. California was beautiful, with its rolling hills, stunning coastline, and sunshine that seemed to never end. We found a lovely apartment complex in a serene neighborhood, away from the chaos of the world. The building was modern, with 5 floors, a lift, and an all-around secure environment. It had everything we could have asked for, the perfect place to call home. Mark's job kept him busy, working as a consultant, while I also worked long hours, adjusting to the new life. The first few months of our life in California were peaceful, and we settled in nicely. It was a simple life, and we enjoyed every moment of it. We made a few friends, explored the area, and spent time getting to know our neighbors. But I couldn't help but feel something was missing. I was far away from the city I had known, from the people who had always been around me. And though Mark was with me, there was a void, a feeling that something wasn't quite right. It was during one of those quiet, lonely evenings in June when I first felt a strange presence. Mark had planned a weekend getaway with some of his friends to Lake Tahoe, a picturesque location not far from where we lived. They were leaving for the weekend, and I was left alone in our apartment. At first, I didn't mind the solitude. I thought it would be a nice break for me to relax. I could finally unpack the boxes that had been sitting in the corner of the room, get some work done, and enjoy a peaceful weekend. But as the day turned to night, things started to feel off. I had just finished tidying up when I noticed the clock. It was nearly 10 o'clock. The apartment was eerily quiet. The air conditioning hummed in the background, but aside from that, there was no sound. As I began to get ready for bed, I heard a faint sound, a low thud, like something hitting the wall. It was so subtle that I thought I might have imagined it. But as I lay in bed, I heard it again, this time louder, followed by the sound of footsteps. I strained my ears to listen, but the noise stopped suddenly. I dismissed it as nothing more than the building settling. After all, we lived in an apartment, and I had gotten used to the creaks and groans of the structure. But the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It was almost midnight when I finally drifted into a deep sleep, my mind replaying the strange noises I had heard earlier. I hadn't been asleep for long when the dream began, a vivid and unsettling one. In the dream, I was walking down a dark hallway in our building, and as I reached the door to our apartment, I saw a shadow lurking outside. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was there, waiting for me. I woke with a start, my heart racing, but the shadow was gone. For a moment, I thought I might have just been dreaming, but the feeling of dread didn't leave me. I looked at the clock. It was just after 1 o'clock. I turned over in bed, trying to shake off the feeling that something was wrong. Then I heard it, a noise at the door. A scraping sound like metal on wood. I felt my stomach drop. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the noise. Was it someone trying to break in? I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just the wind or a stray animal outside. But deep down, I knew it was something more. I could hear the faint rustling of footsteps in the hall, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone trying to unlock the door. The doorbell rang once, twice, and then silence. The atmosphere in the room felt thick, oppressive, like something heavy was pressing down on me. I lay frozen in bed, my breath shallow and fast. I wanted to get up, to look through the peephole, but I couldn't move. It wasn't until I heard a soft knock on the door that I managed to gather the strength to get out of bed. My body was trembling as I walked to the door, but the moment I peered through the peephole, I froze. There were 4 men standing outside, their faces obscured by the shadows. They were hunched over, trying to open the door with a crowbar. Panic surged through my veins, and I scrambled for the intercom. My hands were shaking as I pressed the button to alert the building's security. "Help! Someone is trying to break in!" I shouted into the intercom. The guard responded immediately, promising to send someone up. As I waited, I heard the men outside discussing something, their voices low and hushed. It was clear they weren't just passing through. They had planned this. They had come to rob us, to take everything we had. My heart pounded in my chest as I backed away from the door, unsure of what to do next. It felt like an eternity before I heard footsteps in the hall again, and then the lift dinged. The security guard arrived with another officer, and when they reached our floor, the thieves had vanished. I watched in shock as the guards inspected the area and realized the men had somehow escaped by climbing up to the terrace and jumping to the adjacent construction site. It didn't make sense. How had they gotten past security? How had they even known where we lived? My mind raced as I called Mark. He was still on his way back from Lake Tahoe, but I couldn't wait any longer. I needed him here. When he finally answered the phone, I was almost in tears. "Mark, someone tried to break in. They were at the door. I don't know how they got in, but they were waiting to rob us," I said, my voice shaky. "I'm on my way home. Just stay calm," Mark reassured me. "I'll be there as soon as I can." When Mark finally arrived, I was still in a daze, my hands cold with sweat. He was shocked when he heard what had happened. We both tried to make sense of the events, but nothing seemed to add up. The guards had no explanation for how the thieves got in, and the security system had failed to prevent it. But there was something that didn't make sense. I had been asleep when it happened, but there was one detail I couldn't ignore. My mother had been there. My mother had woken me up when I didn't hear the knocking. She had slapped me to get my attention, even though she had been dead for 3 years. I realized then that the presence I had felt, the hand that had shaken me awake, wasn't just my imagination. It was my mother's spirit. She had come to protect me, to ensure I was safe, even though she was no longer in this world. Tears filled my eyes as I told Mark everything. I explained how my mother had died from cancer during the pandemic and how I hadn't even been able to say goodbye. She had passed away alone, and I never had the chance to be there for her in her final moments. But now, 3 years later, she had come back to protect me. Mark was silent for a moment before he spoke. "Which mother?" "My mother lives in town, but yours. She passed away, remember?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. I froze. I hadn't thought about it in the heat of the moment, but I had just realized that my mother had died 3 years ago. And yet, her presence had been so real, so comforting. I couldn't explain it, but I knew in my heart that she had saved me that night. She had guided me, even from beyond the grave. The feeling of relief and terror mingled in my chest as I sat there with Mark. I realized that this experience had changed me. I had always believed in spirits, in something beyond this world, but now I knew for certain that our loved ones don't leave us. They may be gone from this world, but their love, their protection, never truly fades. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what had happened. My mother had been there when I needed her most, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. I had never believed in guardian angels before, but now I understood. Maybe my mother wasn't just a guardian from my past, but one who would always watch over me. In the days that followed, nothing strange happened again, but I felt different. I knew that my mother was still with me, guiding me, protecting me, and no matter what happened, I would never be alone again.